I kind of grabbed my pistol and I looked, and the person was already out of the door and they had a rifle ready and drawn.
If you guys have been listening to the show for a while, you've heard more than one episode where OC spray got someone out of a bind and prevented them from having to use more force in a personal self-defense encounter. Palm Industries is the OC of choice for active self-protection. We love everything about them. We love the efficacy of their product. We've seen it work. Our actual employees have had to use it in the field against a crazy person, and it worked. We love the flip-top reversible clips. Look, they've removed any excuse not to carry OC. This is going to solve far more problems more frequently than a firearm, and I wouldn't leave the house without it. As I've said before, I got one for my wife. I got one for my daughter. My son, who's about to go into law enforcement, carries one. And I've had a good friend, Soleil Rocher, who's a member of the Active Self-Protection Team, who used it successfully in a real-life defensive encounter. Get one at get-ask.com/POM. Get-ask.com/POM. Alrighty, gang. Welcome back to the Active Self-Protection Podcast. I am your host, Mike Williver, and I am still and always your favorite former Fed. With us today, a new friend of mine. His name is Alfonso Gallegos. He lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He is a single dad with one son. He is in sales, and he has a whopper of a story to tell us, and I can't wait to get into this and share the lessons with you folks. But first, Alfonso, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate reaching out to us.
Dude, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. So talk to us about your self-defense background. The day this incident happened, you were carrying a firearm. So, you obviously given self-defense some thought, more than most people, I'm sure. So did you grow up in a household where there was a police officer, military, or people were self-defense minded or had guns or anything like that? Or was that something you came to appreciate and be aware of as an adult?
It's 100% I came to appreciate it as an adult. My mom, I was raised by a full-time single mom. My dad wasn't in my life at all. And my mom didn't like guns. She was super anti-gun. I don't want one in the house, yada, yada. But then when I got custody of my son and realized the city that I'm living in, there's so many situations where, like, if somebody came to my house, they came to rob me, and I wouldn't be able to protect my son, So that's when I realized I have to take firearms seriously. And I went and did some classes. I'm real close with some friends that have their FFLs. So, there's a whole community of firearms, and everybody that's, we love firearms and we take them very serious, So.
Very good. So for the folks, I always try to point out, not to let certain things go by, because we have listeners all over the spectrum who know a lot about guns and self-defense and who know nothing. So for those who don't know, FFL just means Federal Firearms License. That means they have a license to sell. Depending on the level of license, they can either sell or they can repair and customize weapons depending on the need. That's what that means, just so you know. So when would you say that was that you decided, okay, I need to start thinking about my safety and security and that of my son? And what did you do to get yourself in a position where you felt confident you could protect yourself?
I would say roughly about 2 years ago is when I bought my first gun. I had one of my friend's cousins. He had put a Glock on the table, and he said, "Hey, well, if you want to buy a gun, like, I'll show you. We can go to the gun store." And he was like, he took it apart. He was like showing me how it works. And I'll be honest, dude, when he put it on the table, I was shaky. Sure. It was one of those like, whoa, that's I'm not sure if I'm ready for all that,
right.
But we went and I purchased my first one. I was in and out in 15 minutes. We took it to the range that same day. I only put about 5 rounds through the pistol, and it was fun. It was liberating. It felt incredible. It felt powerful. And it was one of those, like, I love video games. Mm-hmm. So when I went down the range, it was one of those, like, why haven't I done this sooner in my life, to be honest? But then from that point, I wanted to get some classes, so I started taking some classes. I really wanted to know how firearms worked. I wanted to know the different types of firearms. And then I realized it's this whole, you start going down this rabbit hole.
It's a subculture, yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, and I tell people all the time, you buy one, you're going to end up buying 10. Like, it's, you fall in love with these things. It's fun. It's empowering, I've personally helped people buy their first firearm on multiple occasions. Multiple people do that, and I 100%, dude. I'm all 2A. Like I love firearms, but legally.
Right.
So I want to preface that with there needs to be more guns in good guys' hands, and we need to know how to use them. Obviously, you'll know more as the story progresses, but 100% I believe that more good people should have them.
Yeah, I
You know,
couldn't agree more. Couple things I want to touch on real quick. First of all, I know half our audience is screaming into their smartphone or tablet or wherever they're listening to this, and they want me to ask you what was the first gun you bought. I know they're dying to know. So, what was the first gun you bought?
oh Jesus! It was a SARS 9. It
Okay.
was it wasn't nothing crazy. It was a full size 9, 17. It held like 17 rounds.
Hmm.
It shot okay. It kept jamming on me, and it was the most frustrating thing. But my instructor, when I finally showed him, like I would shoot it and it would jam. I'd give it to him. He would just shoot it and nothing jammed, and I was
Okay.
like, well, that's nice.
So,
But then
what was the problem? Do you know? Was
well,
it
yeah. So
the
he
grip
so he
or?
took it apart and he was like, this is one of those pistols that needs to be wet. And I
Mm,
didn't know that there was a difference
right.
across them, but that's just one of those. He said, as long as it's properly lubed up, you'll be fine. And then never jammed again after that. So
This episode brought to you by HK, United States. No, I'm just kidding. John's a brand ambassador for them, so we all love our HKs. But HKs are not cheap. I don't know many people that would buy that for their first gun. At any rate, other thing you said was you went out and got training. Now there's a bit of a divide in the 2A communities. You might have heard, Alfonso. Uh, I think that it should be legal for anyone, as long as they're not a felon or adjudicated insane or otherwise a prohibited possessor, for anyone to go and buy a gun and walk out, as long as they're, not those things, and walk out the same day and never do another thing. That should be legal. But as Chris Rock once said, just because you can do it doesn't mean it's to be done. So I guess what I'm saying is this: if you all you can afford to do is buy a cheap pistol and some ammo to protect yourself and your family, I get it. But at least watch the extra channel. Try dry fire. Do something besides just put it in an Uncle Mike sausage sack and call it good, because that's not ideal. If you can afford to, I highly recommend you seek out some training. If you go on Active Self Protection's website, I'm pretty sure we link to instructors. If not, then let me know in the Apple comments or whatever, and I'll fix that. But find some competent instructors and get some instruction, because it couldn't hurt to know more, as much as possible, about the gun, how to shoot it, how to protect yourself. So, you got this first gun, and that was, you said, a couple years ago when you got custody of your son.
yeah, well, I've gotten custody of my son
Okay.
since June of 2015. So it was an actual incident. I sold a car. The person was kind of sketchy, and he brought the car back 2 weeks later, and he was trying to claim it a lemon. And he drove up into my driveway, and it was just one of these situations. He was very much like a gangster type of person. Like, I shouldn't have sold him the car, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. The car was good, but he was just not a good person. And at that moment, when I realized him and his girlfriend, I thought to myself immediately, what if they have a gun in the car?
Mm-hmm.
And then what's going to happen to me, my son, and my mom? What are they going to do? So if they gun me down, what's happening to my mom or my son? So that was the pivotal moment that made me realize that I needed to be able to protect myself and have a personal firearm. And then that was it. That started the whole journey.
And in Albuquerque, you hate to say it, it's got a lot of rough parts of it. There's this pretty high crime rate there, and hopefully that can change over the future. But it is, I would not call Albuquerque the land of enchantment. It's just somehow situated in the land of enchantment, right? Isn't that what they call New Mexico, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Not sure why. Anyway, so moving on.
There's beautiful places in New Mexico. I'll give it that.
Sandias are gorgeous. A lot of the people are awesome. I have a friend who lives in Albuquerque, so I've been there a couple times, and I enjoyed it. I just didn't go after dark. Moving on. So talk to us about what you were doing the day of the incident, and you were carrying. Talk to us about how you were carrying, and kind of walk us through what happened, and we'll go from there.
So I on my fitness journey, I do morning fasted cardio. So every morning, what I do is I just leave my house. I walk in one direction for 30 minutes and basically just make a big loop around and walk back to my house. Usually it takes me about an hour, perfect amount of cardio, simple, easy, consistent.
Mhm.
That's what I've done. I've done it for years. And during summertime and during when the weather's nice, I'll walk with my shirt off. Believe me, not trying to brag or nothing. I'm just trying to get a tan. Like I wear my sweats, my shoes, and I put my headset on, my phone, my keys, and my pistol. That's it. So as I was walking out, I always had my pistol right here on my hip,
Mm-hmm.
and it was very much open carry. Everybody could see that I had it. And I always walk on the left side of the street so that I can see when vehicles are coming to me. Because I learned a long time ago, and I've heard, never walk in the same direction as traffic because you can never tell if a car's coming from behind you.
Yep.
So I always walk on the left side so that if there's a vehicle coming, I can see it. God forbid, and this is literally a thought I've had, what if a car jumps a curb? I'll be able to jump out of the way.
I've had this exact same thought enter my mind more than once. Like I'm walking and there's people doing 45 miles an hour down the street within 5 feet of me, and that could go really poorly potentially. So being aware is a good idea.
Right, absolutely. So, and during these times, I'll make little videos, do little whatevers, and sometimes I'm just jamming out, got my headset in. It's a pretty nonchalant, chill walk. It's a halfway decent neighborhood. I'm not walking like I'm walking in the nicer part of town. There's quite literally a nice park over there with a tennis court and yada yada. So that day, I was walk like normal. The only thing that was really weird was there was a pretty girl that came trying to ask me to use my phone, which I thought was kind of weird, but she looked like a crackhead kind of person. So I was like, I'm not like
prettiest crackhead you ever met or what?
Dude, I'm saying I didn't stay in chat, but just very quickly I was like, hey, and so I said, no, I don't have like, she asked me for my phone. No, you can't use it, whatever. I just moved away from that relatively quickly.
Right.
So then I kept walking. I go up to the street, and then I go to this next. I go up to the stop sign and just my normal route, and I'm on the sidewalk. And now what I do think probably was something that I shouldn't have done, but it's not really a big deal, is that I was making a movement where like I was trying to work my abs while I was walking.
Yeah,
so it was almost
the movement you were showing me just now on the video. That guy video is sort of like what a boxer might do when they're shadow boxing and your fists are up in front of you and you're sort of moving side to side. Yeah,
right, as you're walking, and I was deliberately trying to like flex my abs to try to like work it.
Sure.
And it was literally maybe a block and a half of this walk. So and again, hindsight being 2020, my headset was in. I couldn't really hear anything because the headset was good. It was loud. I was jamming. I was in the zone. I was just kind of working out. I've never, ever, ever had any weird experiences during this walk. So under normal circumstances, I shouldn't have had any concern at all. So as I was walking this truck, and I didn't notice the truck, to be honest. I might have like looked up and glanced, but who's really going to pay attention to a car that's just driving? I mean, that's what they do. So anyways, as I'm walking, I get roughly about a block and a half down, and completely out of nowhere, I hear a screeching, and then it was like a roar of an engine screeching, and then this door hits me, and then I fly out. I felt like I did a backflip. It was scary. So I got hit by a truck, and then I did this backflip is what it felt like. And I got up and I immediately said, what the?
Right.
I was, and like, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I grabbed I kind of grabbed my pistol and I looked, and the person was already out of the door and they had a rifle ready and drawn. So in that, what felt like an eternity, which only happened in a split second, I had the choice if I could have either engaged or I could have ran.
Hmm.
And I know without a shadow of a doubt, there was no way that I was going. Well, first off, my holster wasn't, it was loose. So when I pulled it from my sweats,
Mm-hmm.
it came with the pistol. So so I was already at a disadvantage. I ended up fixing my holster, and that was a big problem that I learned, afterwards. But I knew when I went to go draw, I was already behind.
Mm-hmm.
They already had their rifle ready to go.
Right.
So in that split second, the only thought I had was to run, and I knew I had to run for my life. So um, I ended up dropping my pistol because I was thinking if they're trying to steal my gun, then take the gun, and I was gone. Because there was nothing I could have done anyways. Like I wouldn't have been able to turn around, shoot out. Like I would have lost and I would have died. 110%. If I would have engaged fire with them, they would have killed me.
So let's talk about that for a moment. Stephanie Widener, our CEO, likes to say that when a thing is happening, whether it's, you think someone's setting off fireworks in the hallway in your high school. No, they're not. No one does that. No one sets off fireworks in the hallway. If you hear that, it's probably gunfire, and you should radically and rapidly accept that reality and deal with it accordingly. So would you say, how long in your mind, how long did it take you after you sort of got up and started to orient yourself? I totally get that. Holy shit, what the fuck? Someone just, hit me with their car, and your whole body is just like, what's happening? I need to figure this out. There's adrenaline. Your heart's racing. So you get up. You see this guy get out with a rifle. How long did it take you to orient yourself? Because I'm sure it wasn't what you were expecting to see, and figure out, okay, this is happening now. This isn't just someone hit me with their car. I'm being robbed maybe, or someone's trying to kill me maybe, or what? How long did that, walk us through that? What went through your mind in that moment?
Well, so I mean, first off, I was jamming out. I was in the zone. I was 100% not thinking fight or flight. I was in a safe place during my normal walk.
Right.
They hit me from behind. So it's there, and I've talked to people about like, well, why didn't you do X, Y, Z? It's not like they came up to me from the front, and it's not like this was a duel where we said, hey, let's count 5 paces, turn and draw.
Right.
No, these people hit me with their truck. This is a 4-door gigantic Dodge truck. They could have killed me with just that part of it. So I'm grateful that I only got away with some cuts and bruises from the truck. But once I got up and I was somewhat oriented, and I just intuitively went for my pistol to like see what was going on, because that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
But when I saw that he was already out of the door, and he had his hand, like his rifle in his hand, they were already ready.
He had like a low ready position basically with a rifle.
Yeah, exactly. And at that point, I knew it was, once I saw that, it was a split second decision of the only options I like. If I try engaging, I'm going to die. If I run, I might have a chance. And to be honest, well, yeah. And to be honest, even during the run part, I still thought I was going to die, because who knows? Like, I don't know where these people came from. Like, this was just, it was bad, insane, dude. Like, what happened to me? Where did these people come from? What's going on? All I know is they have a gun and I'm running. I need to get away from this situation. So that's all I can think.
So
of.
You did, in Stephanie's words, radically and rapidly accept reality. Like, hey, this is happening. I need to respond. What are my options? Quickly. My options are either engage this guy. No, that's a bad idea. Or I could run away and maybe still die, but maybe live. And dropping the gun, I think, honestly, people are they're gonna pillory me in the comments for this. I think that was probably really smart, actually, because what else? You don't know these guys. Why else are they assaulting you other than to get your gun? And if you distract them with that, throw it on the ground. Maybe they'll go pick it up, and that'll give you another 2 seconds to run away. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was in high school, I managed a movie theater out in Maryland. Guy comes in, buys a ticket, goes to his theater. It's the last showing on a semi-busy night. And he walks back out into the lobby as we're closing the concession stand. We're cleaning up everything, and I'm counting the money and yada, yada. And I had this little cash box, a little gray cash box. It's got bills and coins in it, and that's on the counter. And this guy walks through the lobby and out front, and then he almost immediately starts to walk back. I was like, okay. And I go to open the door because the doors are locked from the outside at this point. I open the door and I throw the door open. Hey, here you go, man, whatever. And he's like, thanks. I'm like, no problem. I turn around to walk back towards the concession stand, and I hear him say, where's the manager's office? And I turned around to say, I'm the manager. And I was going to say, can I help you? When I turned around, I was looking down the barrel of a Glock 19. And I had to make some quick decisions. So I don't think I told this story on the show before. I was a police explorer at the time, so I had a little, kind of a little bit of fundamental knowledge about what to do and not to do. I decided I'm going to comply with this guy. Immediately, I'm just going to comply. It doesn't seem like he wants to kill anybody. He just wants money. So it's not my money. It belongs to the movie theater. So I run up and I'm yelling at all employees. I'm like, all right, everybody, we're being robbed. Everybody go upstairs to the manager's office and I'll meet you up there. And I wasn't really formulating a plan in my head, but they all did what I said. And they went through this oak door and up the stairs. And the guy's 10 feet behind me. I grabbed the cash box and I threw it almost at him. Like, here's some money. And I throw it at him and it distracts him. And I get through the door and I close it and lock it. So he gets away with $50 in fives, ones, quarters, and dimes and nickels. And all my employees are upstairs. By the way, epilogue, he's now banging on the oak door, telling me I better let him in. I'm like, no, I don't think I'm going to do that at all. I say all that to say this. I think, as crazy as it sounds, I think giving up the gun and going, that's probably what they're after. Let me get the heck out of Dodge was probably the smartest move. As crazy as that sounds, I'm sure people will be like, well, these criminals they're going to get guns one way or another. I'd rather be able to have this conversation with Alfonso alive and have him be -1 gun. So you drop the gun, you take off running. Going through your mind is, I'm going to die. They're going to, his guy's got a rifle. He can hit me from any distance I'm going to run to. So what happens then?
So at that point, that's the part that really messes with me because, it was a matter of just thinking about my mom and my son the entire time. And just because as I'm running, as I crossed the street, I thought I heard 2 shots fired. After reviewing the video, it sounded like it looks like there's just one. But, dude, all I could think about was living and surviving. So I just ran straight. And then as I started to think, I was like, well, if I'm running straight, now I have a perfect line of sight. So I better start zigzagging. So I started zigzagging. I tried getting behind some cars. And then I had to jump over, just to try to get to safety. I just jumped over the first block wall fence I could find. But as I get behind the fence, there's a dog barking, and then there's this. I'm in some random person's house yard. Who
might think you're an intruder, by the way.
Yeah, right. So then I'm like, fuck. So now, what if these people try to shoot me? This is fantastic, right? So I'm like, and then at where I was at, dude, there was a block wall and a block wall. There was nowhere for me to go. So I was thinking to myself, if these guys were chasing me, I felt like fucking prey, dude. Like I felt like I was getting hunted. I don't know, like it is the most disgusting. I do not wish this on anybody. But so as I was like hiding there behind this wall, all I could think of is, great, now I don't have my firearm and I'm in a perfect, easy shot for somebody to just come take me out.
So I know the audience is screaming into their smartphone right now for the second time in this episode, but now they're asking, were they actually chasing you? Now you're going to be able to go over to the main channel and watch the video, but for the sake of those who can't yet, was someone chasing you, or had they beaten feet out of there?
They did. So they weren't chasing me, thank God. They stopped chasing me across the street. So they went as far as across the street, and as you'll see in the video, he made a shot, and then he went to go pick up the casing, which was
not his first rodeo, probably.
Right, yeah. Exactly. So, and then you can hear in the video that these 2 people were arguing, saying, "Get back in the car, get back in the truck. It's not worth it." Yada yada yada. And so that's when they get back in the car, and then they take off. So going back to me behind the wall, first person I called was my mom. you know. And it was like, well, why wouldn't you call 911? Because if I'm going to die, I don't want to be talking to 911. I
Yeah,
want to talk to my mom.
I totally understand that.
And ooh, thank you for this opportunity, man, because I haven't gotten to talk about this for a while.
Absolutely, man.
Um,
Take your time. We have all the time in the world, other than your son wants to go trick or treating. But other than that,
right, right. But he actually doesn't know about it. I haven't told him, and nor do I want to.
he doesn't need to know.
No, he's a kid. Um, so, anyways, I talked to my mom, and she's like, "Well, where are you at?" And I'm like, "Mom, I'm on my walk. I'm at this normal place that I'm at. I'm always at." Why would she know? Like, she's never came with me to this walk.
Sure.
So I'm trying to figure out like my location, and I'm just like I'm trying to like survive, and I'm trying to like think of what's going on, and I haven't heard any more shots fired, so that's great. So I'm just waiting it out a little bit, and then I see across the street that other neighbors were starting to come out of their house. So I ran over there, and now imagine like I'm freaking out. I'm bloody. I'm shirtless, and I'm wearing gray sweatpants.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm running over to this guy at his door. And I'm like, "Hey, dude, did you see what happened?" Like, I'm like frantic, and he's like, calm down." And I'm like, of course, I can imagine like if somebody was running at me like that, I'd be like, "Whoa," like
Yeah.
that's too much. And then it kind of sounded like he was police, like not on duty or something. So I was like, maybe you could help me. Turns out he had nothing to do with that. He was just working from home, but he didn't see anything. And I'm like, well, was there video? Do you have a Zoom camera? Whatever those things are on your door. He wasn't really much of a help, and I don't like. I'm freaking out. I'm mad. I just lost my pistol. It was a $650 pistol. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was really upset about that. And I'm alive at this point, so like I'm happy. Then I went. My mom finally came, and as I was walking back to the crime scene, there was a gentleman that was walking out of his garage that owned the house right there on that corner. And I asked him, do you have cameras? Did you see anything? He said, actually, I do have cameras. I said, are they working? He said, yeah, they are. So I can pull the footage. And I was like, oh my God, we have to see this.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm on the phone with 911. There was a bird flying over the police birds or whatever.
The ghetto bird, yes.
Yeah. And so then we finally waited a little bit. The police showed up. It took way longer than I would have liked. I mean, they took probably 2 hours to get there. And
hold on. So you called the police, said you were just run over, almost or shot at, and you lost a pistol, and it took them 2 hours?
Maybe an hour and a half.
That's insane. Okay, well, that's still insane, though.
But either way,
crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy talk.
Because if I would have died, I mean, dude, I was quite literally seconds away from being a statistic on the sidewalk. And and nobody really, until they saw the video, nobody really gave a shit. It was so far-fetched, like nobody gets hit by a truck while they're on a walk and then shot at. What? Like and I'm so grateful for that video, because had I not had that video, I would have just been a lunatic telling a crazy story that nobody would have believed. And but so thankfully, when the police finally did get there, they looked at the sidewalk, and I said, "This is where it happened." And thankfully, by the grace of God, my pistol ended up being hidden behind a bush. So I was very happy about that, because again, I'm running a Hellcat. I love that little thing. It's my daily. I love it, and I was really upset that I was already on the phone with my FFL dealer, saying, "Hey, my pistol just got stolen," like doing the whole thing. And but anyway, so the police, he handled it as best he could, and he was happy that there was video and that we were able to see the shooter's face on the video.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, to be honest, the fact that we have this type of evidence, we might actually have a shot at finding these people. So that felt pretty good.
So
So that gentleman,
the audience is
go
now
ahead.
screaming for the third time. Did they catch the guy or the people? Did they ever end up finding him?
Well, the story's not over yet.
Okay.
So I got the video from the gentleman. I come home and I'm just trying to like zoom in on it. I'm trying to do that thing, and and then I immediately just get it out on my Facebook and say, "Hey, this is what happened. Here's a video." And thankfully, it went viral. It was one of the sweetest things. Like, and I hadn't had like the best year at that point. Like, there was a lot of stuff that was going on. I was pretty depressed. I was going through a lot of stuff, and then this happening was like the pinnacle of like the sucks, right? And but then the outpouring of love that I received from all of these people that were just oh my God, Fonz, are you okay? Like, if you need anything, hey, I'm here for you. And everybody was sharing it. I mean, everybody was sharing it. Sure, you had a few trolls. Everybody was like, "Well, what did you do? How did you know them?" Blah 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 blah.
Hey, I'll tell you what I would have done if that was me.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I can't even begin to tell you,
Yeah.
dude. And
World's full of them.
yeah, and I'm like, first off, you wouldn't have done that. And if you done that, you would have died. I don't care who you were. You're not John Wick.
Mm-hmm.
And then even if you would have taken out the first guy, you would have gotten taken out by the second guy. And then I was like, okay, so look, say best case scenario, if I would have been able to take out both people, where would I be at today? In prison?
Potentially.
Fighting to try to say that this is self-defense.
If it makes you feel any better, Alfonso, I have 30 years combined in law enforcement. The last 25 as a special agent for a federal agency. I was a firearms instructor, an active shooter instructor, a defensive tactics instructor, a non-deadly force instructor, and I worked gang and narcotics task forces for most of the time that I was there. And when I talk on the internet, people just say words back to me. They just say words, and I'm like, okay, you can't let it bother you. The people that's just the way some folks are wired, and they're sitting behind their keyboard in their mom's basement, and they're anonymous, so right. Whatever. Don't just ignore the haters, dude.
Yeah, no, so many people showed me massive amounts of love. It was wonderful. So thankfully, due to some anonymous tips, we were able to find the driver within about 48 hours.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was incredible. So he's currently in custody, and he's spoken a little bit since he's gotten an attorney. I believe that he's saying a lot less at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And there's rumors about the shooter, but officially we don't know who the shooter is, and we don't know a name, and he's not in custody. So there's not a whole lot more I can say and or know about that. I wish I did, even on a personal level. Like, I would just like to know who the shooter was.
Anyone sophisticated enough to go and locate their spent brass and pick it up and not leave it there, probably an above average criminal, or at least a little bit educated as far as what to do and what not to do. I truly hope they find him and prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. Let's talk for just a second about some lessons, because that's why we do this show, right? People can learn.
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, I'm not a fan of open carry. If it's the only way you can carry, fine, but the reason I don't like it is for exactly what happened to you. You seem like you were pretty aware of your surroundings. You were doing your best, but once they know you're armed, they can always one up you before you're in a fight. They have the advantage. What happened with you. Right. The second thing is, folks, if you're getting a firearm, if you're going to carry it concealed or open, whatever it is, make sure you practice with your holster, right? Make sure you're aware of your ability to draw. So if you're wearing basketball shorts or sweats or whatever, make sure you're able to draw your firearm one-handed, right? And if you can't, figure something else out. There's other options out there. There's all sorts of holsters for when you're wearing casual wear, or you're wearing, gym wear, whatever it is. And then the third one I want to talk about is the headphones. People make fun of me because I'll walk around with one AirPod in, for my fun, listening to a podcast, listening to music, whatever. If I'm in public, Even at home, I know this is silly, but even at home, I have a hard time wearing noise canceling headphones, especially. I have the AirPod Pros. I only use them on an airplane. That's it. And even then, I feel myself looking around because I don't like to not be aware of my surroundings. Do you
Mhm.
think, had you not been wearing headphones that day, or at least had an ear open, that would have changed anything? I don't think maybe it would, but you tell me what you think.
I've thought about that. If I was walking normally, not doing that exercise, if I had one headphone in, I don't think it would have changed much,
Right.
to be honest, because I mean they hit me from behind, and it was such a random occurrence. And again, when you watch the video, you'll see that they accelerated quickly with their truck to hit me
Yep.
from behind. So what are you going to do? I mean, could I have jumped out of the way quicker? But then,
Facing away from the oncoming vehicle, he had to cross into the wrong lane of traffic to do what he did. Probably. No,
yeah,
I tend to doubt it. And if he'd been facing him, all he has to do is turn the wheel a quarter inch to adjust to where you are now, and that's all there is to it. Again, I talk all the time on the badge cams, like, as a cop, you sign in for your shift, and you're like, "Hi, I wonder what'll happen today. Probably maybe a burglary call, a couple car accidents." And then I see a video like yours, and I'm like, "That's another thing I've never seen before." That's just completely random attack. Have you heard about any other attacks of this sort in your area? Because this is still the only one I've heard of where someone did what they did to you.
well, so apparently there was another person that was attacking a very specific group of people, and he was attacking walkers. So they thought there was a correlation, but apparently there was not at all.
Hmm.
So, it felt random. But if you dig into the person that's in custody and the things that he's done and the things that he's been, I'm not going to say his name or anything,
Sure.
but he uh, he's done a lot of bad.
Right.
So it's not far fetched for that particular person. But I mean, it's one of those. If you're a bad guy, if you're a criminal, you're going to do bad guy criminal shit.
Yep.
There's and saying, "Oh, we need more gun laws." Well, that wouldn't have stopped them from doing what they did. If there were more gun laws, that would have only. I mean, that they would have. It would have stopped me from getting mine, I guess. But
Here's the thing about laws, folks. Criminals don't follow them. I thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I appreciate it. Have a good day. Yeah, you can pass all the gun laws you want. That, and I like, in the last few years they've talked about we just want common sense gun laws. Well, what does that even mean? I mean, there's no gun laws that I know of that have prevented an active killer scenario. There's been times when people got a hold of guns legally who shouldn't have been able to. If it was an FFL issue or a NICS check issue or whatever. Pass all the laws you want. We had a guy on the show recently who was at a school, his daughter's school. They lost her off the bus, so he went to pick her up at the bus, and she wasn't there. And this guy and his neighbor were waiting at the bus stop. He happened to be concealed carrying, right, legally. And his friend had a car, and they're like, "Oh, where's our kids?" So they hopped in the car, and he went down to the school to investigate. It was giving the school an earful because it wasn't the first time this had happened. It's a 6-year-old daughter, and the police were called because the other guy who was driving turns out he might have been under the influence. So this guy finally gets his daughter, he's putting him in the car, and as he bends over to put him in the car, his shirt rides up just enough for the officer to see that he's carrying a concealed firearm. He arrests him for having a firearm in school grounds. Ticky tack. Awful, terrible, and I hate it. But it goes to the point that passing more gun laws isn't going to solve anything. We need more, as you said, we need more good people, preferably with training, carrying a firearm responsibly, because the police can't be everywhere at once. And in your case, man, I got to tell you, that really rubs me the wrong way, talking about an hour plus response time for a crime like that. And it's not the dispatcher or the officer's prerogative to hear the story and decide, it's probably fake. Like, that's not a thing. They needed to be there in like 5 minutes, not an hour. So I'm sorry that was your experience with the police department. So moving forward, are you planning on availing yourself of more training or changing things up, or what's your plan as far as your self-defense plan moving forward?
Well, first thing that I did was I fixed my holster. So now my holster will not. I could wear sweats. It will not come off of my
So you
pants.
can draw it one-handed efficiently, quickly.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. So that's the first thing, number one. However, I don't think that would have changed the situation.
Probably not.
You know, I the way that it happened for a reason to allow me to live, as far as I'm concerned. I would never want to relive that moment ever again. It's if you're out walking, be safe, but there's nothing that I could have done differently that would have changed that, and it at the time it was one of those like, is somebody out to get me? Was it a random thing? When
Right.
I found out that it was random, I felt better,
Yeah.
but worse at the same time. I felt better personally because it was random. They don't know who I am. They just saw that I had a gun. They wanted to rob me and steal my gun. Now, in the process, they probably would have killed me had they been successful. So it was one of those, like, if I would have complied, they would have put bullets in my chest. I'm still a proponent for 2A. I love my firearms. I love, shotguns, rifles. I love them all, man. I've got a nice little collection. And again, I've bought, sold, and traded quite a few of them.
Right.
So this hasn't changed how I feel about firearms. To me, firearms are nothing more than a tool, and it's a matter of the end user and how they're going to use it. If you're a bad guy, you're going to be a bad guy with a knife, a fork, doesn't matter, a truck.
A car. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Was there anything else you wanted to talk about or touch on before we part ways and you take your boy trick or treating?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know if there's I don't know if there's any, if you want to say anything, if there's any other questions that you
No,
had
that's
for me.
no. I think we covered everything. So, folks, so lessons today. What are we learning? What are we learning through his hard-won experience, through his terrible experience, so that you don't have to go through it? Holster. Make sure it works. Make sure you can draw with one hand effectively. Headphones. Think about the environment you're in before you put yourself in a position where you can't hear things. Now, would that have changed things for him? Almost certainly not. However, there's a myriad of other things that could happen if you can't hear what's going on around you out in public. Let's talk about open carry. Don't do it unless it's the only way you can possibly carry. That's my advice. Do you still open carry at this point?
No, no.
Yeah. All
I
right.
I the only reason I did it at the time is because I was shirtless, so I didn't really have a choice.
Sure.
But I 100% get concealed carry license. Figure out what your concealed carry laws are in your state, because we got people all over the country. Figure that out and make that happen. Because the only reason that they attacked me, according to what the guy literally said, was we saw that he had a gun and we wanted to take it from him.
Yep. That's how I think people think that the Western world just evolved out of, or just popped into existence out of nothing. There are rules and laws and mores that we have that are unique in the history of the world. There was a time when the biggest, strongest, toughest person with the biggest weapon got what he wanted and took what he wanted, and there was nothing you could do about it. And now we have a judicial system, and we have the system that we have now. And I'd like to think that we're able to fight back against the big, strong guy who wants to take your stuff. In this case, I don't think Alfonso could have done much more than he did, but we have learned lessons from his story. Alfonso, I want to thank you so much for coming on and being willing to tell us what happened. We all hope they catch the other guy. And we are taping this on October 31st, so I hope you have a good night trick-or-treating. Stay safe out there, and I appreciate it.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure.
Okay, gang, that is the end of our exciting interview for this week. And of course, it is now time for the Gutowski Files featuring Stephen Gutowski, friend of the channel. He is the founder of TheReload.com, and he is the host of the weekly Reload podcast. Go check him out over at TheReload.com. Consider getting a membership. He and his reporter Jake Fogelman as well are breaking really important stories. They're getting stuff that no one else seems to be paying any attention to that's very important to us in this community. So give him a look. Stephen, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm not bad. We talked off camera just now about Thanksgiving. We both had a pretty good Thanksgiving, so that's nice. This is coming out a week and a day after Thanksgiving. So we hope that everyone out there in the Active Self-Protection podcast community had a good time wherever you might be around the
Absolutely.
world. So today we're going to discuss an article by Jake Fogelman over at thereload.com. The title is Analysis, a Colorado Gun Control Push is Coming. It is a member exclusive, so you need to be a member to read it. Talk to us. What are those crazy Coloradoans up to now, Stephen?
Yeah, well, so basically, you've had two significant events in Colorado for the last couple of weeks that changed the trajectory for gun policy in that state, or that will likely change it. And the first one, of course, was the election, where Democrats actually picked up seats. They already controlled the state legislature and the governorship, but they actually expanded their majorities to the largest majorities they've ever had. So, um, obviously, that gives them more space to pursue gun control uh, policies in the next legislature, which is coming up shortly. I believe it starts at the beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you had the Club Q shooting, which where 5 people were murdered, and that featured the shooter using an AR-15 in addition to a pistol. So, of course, that brings up a lot of the same debates that we've heard for the last 30 years on the gun policy front, but it adds fuel to potentially passing new restrictions in Colorado. Now, they've been pretty busy the last few years on this front. They passed local gun control, which basically allows cities to enact stricter gun laws. It kind of is a reverse preemption bill.
We talked about that before, and I'd never heard of that. I was shocked that was a thing.
Most states have what's called state preemption, where gun laws have to be enacted by the state legislature, and localities can't pass any laws that are stricter than what the state has put in place. In Colorado now, it's the exact opposite. So they can
right.
They can pass laws, but only if they're stricter than state law in regards to gun regulation.
The air is very thin, Stephen. It's very thin up there.
So, Virginia did something similar, although more limited. Virginia allows localities to put in place certain gun-free zone restrictions. Colorado lets localities put in basically any gun law they want. So you saw a number of them pass their own assault weapons bans in places like Boulder, Colorado, and those have actually fared poorly in court since they came out. They effectively all been blocked by federal judges in the wake of the Supreme Court's Bruin ruling. So, that policy is not really succeeding very well at this point on practical terms. But now what you're likely to see are a couple of areas where the state Democrats are going to try to tighten up their gun laws. And the first one is red flag law. So Colorado has a red flag law, right? Mm-hmm. As a lot of people who followed the news about the Club Q shooting might know, it has a law, but it wasn't used in that case. I mean, of course, the bigger question in that case was, why wasn't he prosecuted for the bomb threats? He threatened to kill his mother, and there's actually a video from that incident where he also threatens to kill the police. Mm-hmm. So why, even if she didn't press charges and somehow that led to no prosecution, I don't know why they couldn't have prosecuted him for the threats against the police. I mean, the whole standoff, they evacuated the neighborhood. He didn't have a bomb in the end, but regardless.
Yeah, that happened in my personal life. I had a neighbor who was beating the crap out of his wife and little kid, and I intervened because the police weren't getting there fast enough. And she, being very smart, left town, left him, got away from him, which is great. But then we had no victim. But the DA was able to charge him because before he left, he threatened me personally as an off-duty law enforcement officer. They charged him with that, and he went to prison.
Yeah, so it's even if, and a lot of localities, my understanding, I'm not a prosecutor or law enforcement or anything, but my understanding is a lot of localities, you don't need a victim to charge in a domestic violence case. But I don't know exactly what the laws are in Colorado, so perhaps that's one excuse. But again, yeah, like you just described there's video of him threatening to kill police if they came into the house. So Why he couldn't have been charged for that remains completely unknown. They've sealed that case, so we don't know more. But the point is, if he'd been convicted of felonies regarding that that bomb threat, he would have been prohibited for life. The
Right.
red flag law, by its nature, is meant to be a stopgap. It's a temporary removal of firearms by using a lower standard of evidence to take some firearms. This is, of course, why it's controversial, these policies, but they're not even in best case scenario, they're not meant to go more than like a year. And if you don't prosecute the person and convict them of the threats that they had made against police and his mother, after the red flag order is over, they will be legally allowed to go and buy guns. So, but regardless of all of that, the most likely step you'll see is some sort of tightening of their red flag law, or I guess more appropriately, an expansion of it, allowing more people perhaps to file for red flag orders. In Colorado, they only allow, I believe, family members and law enforcement. And of course, there's still controversy over those laws, but over that law from some law enforcement officials in Colorado. A lot of them don't like the policy for the reasons that, I just talked about earlier, but there may now be an attempt to institute what New York is doing in the wake of the Buffalo shooting. This is another, of course, the Buffalo shooting was another one where the person was exhibiting red flags beforehand, was taken to a mental health facility, but was not involuntarily committed. So even though they probably could have been or should have been, which that would have made them permanently prohibited, but they also were not red flagged either.
Right.
And so New York's response to that was to make it so that police don't have a choice in whether or not to file a red flag order. So if there is some evidence that they could use to get a red flag order, they will now have to do that. And so obviously it'll still be up to a judge as to whether to issue the order, but you could see something like that happen in Colorado as well, I would imagine.
Real quick, do we know offhand if the police did attempt to file those charges for threatening a law enforcement officer and the DA turned them down, or do we know that much?
We don't know.
Okay.
Or at least I have not heard the specific things he was charged with. I know that the case became sealed, which is also kind of odd because
certainly
he's not a minor.
Right.
He was 21 years old when he made that bomb threat. So I don't know. It's unclear to me why it's sealed. And I saw an interview on CNN with the local DA there, and they just basically said they legally can't say anything about it, even give reasons why it's sealed.
That's fishy.
So
sorry.
So it's just, his grandfather is a politician in California. I don't whether that has any connection whatsoever. Nobody knows. But
right.
Regardless, it's sealed. We don't know. He was charged with multiple felonies, my understanding, but he wasn't prosecuted.
Okay.
So either way, the red flag law expansion is something you could see happen in this upcoming session in Colorado. And then the other possibility that's perhaps even more likely is age restrictions on who can buy so-called assault weapons like AR-15s
right.
and AK-47s is what usually gets put into that bucket of what constitutes an assault weapon. Obviously, this definition varies from state to state.
Yep.
Where they have assault weapon bans implemented. So it's kind of a nebulous term, but either way, we have in the piece one of the definitions they've used in the local assault weapon ban ordinances throughout Colorado. That includes, all semi-automatic center fire rifles that have the capacity to accept detachable magazines and includes certain additional characteristics like a collapsible stock or flash suppressor, the sort of things you see in most assault weapon ban lists.
Things that have zero bearing on the lethality of the weapon in question.
Sure. Now he was 22, so this is a little bit outside the scope of how these laws restrict ownership of AR-15s and other firearms to people who are over 21, so it wouldn't have necessarily actually impacted him, but it's something that's a more politically feasible thing to implement. It's something you see in more places. Florida has one, for instance, after the Parkland shooting, they implemented one. There's restrictions by age on what kind of firearms you can own are not uncommon. Obviously, handguns at the federal level are restricted to people over 21 years old. Sales of them. And so that's another policy that you could see as a sort of halfway to a full assault weapons ban kind of policy, if that makes sense.
Let me ask you to editorialize for a moment. In your opinion, any of these things you've just mentioned, would they have done anything to prevent this shooting?
In Colorado, well, I mean, we haven't gotten to all of them, but I would probably say no, because he didn't just have an AR-15 on him.
Right.
Now, certainly, at least this is related to what happened, because he did use an AR-15 in the shooting, so there's some connection. But he also had a pistol. That's actually the person, the veteran who intervened to stop him, grabbed his pistol and pistol whipped him with it a bunch of times to stop the attacks. So clearly he had access to more than just the rifle. And I mean, you could argue all day long about, is the AR-15 more lethal than a handgun? But when you're talking about a situation where an armed person is ambushing a bunch of unarmed people in an enclosed space, it's how much the specific gun they're using really matters is, I think, a pretty dubious, question. Like, it's going to be, even if they're ambushing armed people, it's still, you guys talk about this all the time on the channel. Like, the person attacking has a huge advantage over the people that they're attacking.
Right.
It's a horrible fact of reality. That, this idea of like, well, you just restrict the number of rounds you can have in your magazine so that they're forced to reload slightly more often. I mean, that's kind of, if that's your plan to stop mass shootings, it's not a very good one.
Nope.
Because it doesn't take that long to reload a magazine. And I mean, your plan is to let somebody just shoot at unarmed people until they run out of ammunition and then reload. Maybe in the second or so they take to reload, that somebody can interview. Like, it's just not a very good plan as far as trying to stop these. It's
always amazed me how most of these laws don't stand up to the slightest bit of scrutiny. If you're just being honest, intellectually honest, and asking the question, would this prevent this from happening again, or would a red flag law have helped or whatever? Well, it might have, but for whatever reason,
well, they have a red flag law.
Yeah, I'm saying, but it couldn't be used because they didn't prosecute him for the crime that he's on videotape doing. So,
well, that's the real problem that I see in the Colorado case, which is there was oftentimes in these incidents there are red flags. So that's where the red flag law gets its name from, right? Is that we keep seeing in a lot of these mass shooting events that the person who carries them out don't have a record necessarily. Usually, not always. Sometimes there's a different kind of mistake, like Sutherland Springs, where the guy had a record, a disqualifying record, and the military just didn't share his records with the FBI, so he was able to go and buy guns. But a lot of times they don't have a record, so they can pass a background check, and a lot of them, that's how they obtain their guns. But they usually have some sort of background where there were incidents where they could have developed a record, but didn't, because for various different reasons, usually lack of action from either people who know them or from law enforcement officials, one or the other. Certainly in this case, in Colorado Springs, that's a very obvious example of it, because oftentimes I would say, some of the stuff where we look back and see red flag laws, it's kind of a hindsight is 2020 thing, where you're talking about somebody who, made a death threat or threatened to kill themselves, or had a history of domestic violence incidents with their between them and their family. The Parkland shooter comes to mind for that stuff, right? Like he threatened to kill himself or threatened to kill other people. But the vast majority of the time, those sorts of threats or incidents don't turn into mass violence. And so you can at least have some defense for how that wasn't, they didn't put a charge on him,
right,
or try to prosecute him or put him in jail over, when you're a teenager and you get into you have a mental health breakdown or something along those lines. You understand what I'm saying? Like, It's not, some of these you can look back and be like, all right, well, if you put a felony on everyone who did that, that's a lot. You put a lot of people away to try and block this, one out of 100 million people who would be, in the vein of carrying something like this out. But when it comes to the Colorado Springs case, that's a lot less questionable to me, because it was a bomb threat. He threatened police. They had a whole standoff. He was they had to evacuate the neighbors' houses. It's just fairly straightforward that, we don't want to give this kid a record and ruin his life, is probably not the right path to go down in that situation.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
You're former law enforcement. You probably have a good idea what I'm talking about here.
Yeah. There was quite a few times I used my discretion to not charge somebody with something, usually because I didn't feel confident charging him with that crime. For example, I would investigate border crossing with narcotics. And there was one time ever in the years that I was down at the border doing that a guy came to me with an actual story. He's like, nope, I actually didn't know the drugs were in the car. And I called the U.S. Attorney's Office and argued it with them. They wanted me to arrest him and figured out later. I'm like, that's not how this works. I need to be convinced the person, I need a probable cause. And so I didn't arrest him. Turns out there were cases following that were similar pattern, where people were being duped. And so, but in this case, if someone's threatening the police, bomb threats, people are being evacuated, I think it's pretty clear cut that person needs a record. If you're going to have red flag laws, what good are they if we're not putting things down on paper that have already happened?
Yeah, I mean, to me, like, the red flag law thing is kind of a red herring, because, again, like, yeah, we could argue he should have been red flagged because they have that law available in Colorado, and he clearly fits as somebody who was a threat to himself or others at that time. But it's a red herring to me because he should have been prosecuted and convicted for the crime of the bomb threats, threatening to murder police. These are not minor things that he was involved with. Right. He didn't comply with police when they showed up. It wasn't like, he said something in the heat of the moment to his mother during a fight, and then she took it overboard and called the cops or whatever. Like, those things happen. We've all watched Cops and see, or we know family members or whatever, where things like that can happen. But this was a hours-long standoff with police. This was not some small thing, and that nothing came out of it for him, no consequences whatsoever, is insane.
Yeah, it is.
That's my point here. Is like, sometimes you can look back at some of these guys who had red flags in their history and say, well, all right, well, something could have been done, maybe should have been done, but it's borderline. You can't, we're going to lock up everybody who does X, makes a one-off threat, right, during a mental health crisis or something. You know, that's probably not the right way to handle it. But so you could at least make an argument in a lot of those cases. You could at least be like, all right, well, law enforcement, okay, I guess I could see it this way. This case is just, there's no real gray area to me. Like, it's just not like this. This is not one of those ones where you look back in hindsight and think, well, there was, all right, I could see why they didn't prosecute him.
He stole a pack of gum. Nope. This is not that. Do me a favor.
Anyone can see why.
If you and or Jake follows up on this, if that previous case gets unsealed, will you let us know? And we can talk about maybe why that happened, because that sounds very fishy to me. There's no reason. He was an adult at the time. He committed I mean,
Yeah,
allegedly committed several felonies, so I don't understand why it's all of a sudden. And I'd like to know what judge sealed
that's
it
the
as
big
well.
question to me. Like, yeah, the cops should have requested a red flag law, perhaps, or maybe that county they're opposed to the sheriff's opposed to the idea of red flag laws. That seems like that's the case. He was opposed to the concept of the law in the first place, but they have used it in the past, so it wasn't like they never used the red flag law after it was implemented. But it's more controversial to me, the red flag situation. Some people will just be opposed to that law on the principle of they don't believe it has enough due process protections. But the first part is just uncontroversial and would have had a permanent effect instead of a controversial temporary effect,
right?
If that makes sense.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I see when I look at that shooting. But back to the law real quick here. There's two more possible proposals that are on the further end of the spectrum here.
Okay.
And the reason to think that these might not, there's a couple of reasons to think these might not come to fruition and get passed in Colorado. The first one is that the governor there is a more moderate Democrat, or is trying to position himself as such, and so he's may not be as supportive of hardware bans, total bans on people owning things. Maybe he'll support the age restrictions or expanding red flag laws, because those are not hardware bans for everyone. But the next two policies would be ghost gun, so-called ghost gun bans, homemade gun ban, ban on making firearms at home, because there are conflicting reports about the guns used in the Club Q shooting. There's been some national reporting that says he bought the guns from, illegally from a dealer because he didn't have a record, because nobody prosecuted him for that bomb threat. And then there was another report from a local NBC affiliate in Colorado that claimed to have sources that said these were homemade firearms without serial numbers. So I guess whether that turns out to be the case will be somewhat relevant. I mean, this is another kind of moot point, because if he didn't have a record, he could have just as easily purchased the guns, even if he did make them himself. So, yeah. But politically, it might make a difference, obviously, if you did use unserialized firearms. And then the other one is obviously just a straight total ban on AR-15s, the sale of AR-15s and AK-47s and similar firearms, so-called, assault weapons, which I think is on the edge of what's possible there. But like I said, they gained seats in the state house, Democrats, and so the party nationally has been pushing for an assault weapons ban. They passed one through the House. The president's calling for a vote in the Senate, even if they don't have the votes to actually pass it there.
Right.
So the Democratic Party has not shied away from this policy, even though it's become somewhat less popular over the last year or so. But that's really where you see I think the edge of what's possible in Colorado. So you could get all those. It's not outside the realm of possibility that you could get every single one of those sorts of provisions. The Sullivan's ban stuff, maybe they'll go for the age restriction instead of the other thing that makes it a little bit less likely is just that they have the local assault weapon bans.
Right.
So, they've given the more liberal areas of the state the ability to go and implement their own local version of an assault weapon ban. And so maybe that takes some steam away from passing a statewide one, but we'll have to wait and see where it all goes.
And we'll definitely follow up on that in the future. We've talked about Colorado here in this space before. Folks, do me a favor. Let's start a new thing. I've said here before how much I dislike when we let anti-gun people put labels on things and define things. And Steven's heard me say this before. I don't like ghost guns. I think if you're a pro 2A person, we start calling them privately manufactured firearms. PMFs, let's make it a thing. If you are lamenting the lack of down-the-middle fair, sane, sober reporting on the Second Amendment and all things firearms related, go over to thereload.com, thereload.com. Check it out. Consider getting a membership. Steven relies on your membership dues to fund his important work, and he's doing the Lord's work out there. Steven, have a wonderful week. I'll see you next time.
Absolutely.